With the impending announcement of Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo Switch, I wanted to have a second critical look at the most recent Smash game on the Wii U and 3DS. While the game sold fine, garnered the typical critical praise, and for the most part satiated fans of the series, there is a lot of baggage that this game carries in the smaller details. I also want to get into the complete game after every balance patch, Mii outfit, and character was added to give a more holistic analysis of the game, not simply how it functioned out of the box 4 years ago. Now that the game is objectively complete, we can look at it with a clear lens. Before we jump into the most recent Smash, however, I want to frame the discussion around where the series has gone before this point. I'm sure most of you watching already know a lot of this information, but bear with me here. I believe a lot of what makes Smash 4 is rooted in the harsh reactions from previous titles, and it could be better understood by looking at the franchise as a whole. If you'd rather skip that little portion, there's an annotation in the description. So how did we get here? Super Smash Bros. Has been around since 1999. The series started on the N64 as a humble, novel approach to a fighting game. Although the game was not originally about Nintendo's All-Stars, it was decided sometime in development that the title would feature characters such as Mario, Donkey Kong, Link, and Pikachu. Rather than a traditional fighter that used health bars to decide the victor, Super Smash Bros. Is based on knocking the other fighter out of the ring. The genius of this concept is that it is much more accessible to newcomers and an interesting alternative for those looking for a different fighting game experience. Rather than having to memorize specific combos, players just needed to learn simple moves and then improvise to figure out how to build up damage and knock their opponent out. It's remarkably simple, but also remarkably deep. While players could easily approach the title and understand the systems and controls, mastery of the game offered a competitive slant. Based on player inputs, all sorts of combos, clutch knockouts, and crazy comebacks could be performed. The second Smash Bros. Title, Melee, introduced systems that remained simple to use and understand, but demanded an incredible amount of skill to master. Competitive players were able to discover these techniques and implement them into higher level play. A flourishing community of tournament players swam past the shallow shore of this game into the endless depth of the fighting system. With the third installment of the series, director Masahiro Sakurai decided he wanted to move into a more casual, user-friendly direction, as was Nintendo at the time. This game featured a larger allotment of game modes such as co-op events, boss rush, and a long campaign presenting a story about the entire cast of Nintendo characters. This adventure mode was ambitious and unique to the series. It played like a platformer mixed with a brawler, but had RPG elements to play with as well. While these additions were praised in reviews of the game, competitive players felt alienated due to the removal of advanced techniques for Melee, the overall slower pace of the game, and strange implementations like tripping. When the fourth Super Smash Bros. Was announced, early developers' interviews expressed that this game was to feature customizable characters and a uniform game that works on Nintendo's portable and home consoles. With developer intentions pointing to a balance to the hardcore sensibilities of Melee mixed with the casual tendencies of Brawl, it sounded like this would be the most ambitious title yet. So how did it do? Let's talk about the roster. So the roster in this game is fittingly enormous, and it's important for Super Smash Bros. To have a large celebratory roster. From all-stars like the Mario Brothers to more obscure characters like Mr. Game & Watch and the Robotic Operating Buddy, Nintendo seems to have covered their bases here. Brawl already had a 39-character roster full of the most iconic Nintendo properties, but they managed to add some really interesting characters here. The villager from Animal Crossing fights like no other character, relying on slingshots, fireworks, and chop down trees to defeat his opponents. He can take projectiles shot at him into his pocket, and you'll hear the same grabbing the item from the Animal Crossing games. Little Mac is a boxer, and for that reason he is awful in the air. He has weak aerial moves and an awful recovery, but he moves like a dream on the ground. Just like the Punch-Out games, he has a meter that charges up for a KO punch, which adds an interesting dynamic to play as or against Little Mac. Bowser Jr. sits inside of the clown car and uses an assortment of obstacles found in the Mario Bros. Games, such as cannonballs and hammers. His side special move seems to be an homage to Mario Kart and is a huge part of his approach options. Shulk uses the adaptive power of his sword to change his in-game attributes. He can activate his Buster mode to score extra damage at the cost of less knockback, or activate Shield mode to gain more survivability at the cost of speed. The vast majority of Wii Fit Trainer's moveset consists of yoga poses that have really abnormal and unique hitboxes. And man, the third-party editions of this game are lifelong dreams come true. Seeing Final Fantasy's Cloud battling Link is something I never thought would happen, and likewise seeing Mega Man, Sonic, and Mario in the same game is equally breathtaking. Their in-game design pays tribute to game history by including attacks and mannerisms found in their original games. You can tell by their movesets that these characters were made with love and respect. They even implemented an exclusive control scheme for Ryu, breaking the conventional controls of Super Smash Bros. To make him feel like an extension of his Street Fighter legacy. While this is the largest, most inspired roster of the series, the roster does not come without its flaws. Because Smash 4 was developed for two systems with vastly different degrees of power, certain cuts had to be made to ensure the game worked for the underpowered 3DS. You'll notice there are certain glaring omissions in this title, and most notably the Ice Climbers and Pokemon Trainer. These were two of the most unique characters inside of the series, and so it was disappointing to see them cut for the sake of solidarity with the 3DS version. Along with those cuts, it seems that certain characters were watered down to condense the amount of power required to run them. For instance, Olimar had access to 6 Pikmin in Brawl, but in Smash 4 he is restricted to 3, and I imagine that's one of the reasons Olimar is not as viable as he used to be in competitive play. While Pokemon Trainer was removed from the game, Charizard was made into his own standalone character. While Charizard is a great character, he was much more unique in Brawl, allowing players to switch between the two other Pokemon characters in a match, and the Pokemon Trainer character really captured the essence of Pokemon, a game where you utilize a number of monsters based on which one would be most advantageous at any given situation. Olimar in Brawl captured the essence of Pikmin, a game where you use a small army of creatures to protect yourself. Some of the additions of this game feel tone-deaf and unnecessary as well. Kid Icarus, a not-so-popular, recently revived and then killed again franchise, received 2 new characters, while massively popular franchises like Donkey Kong, Metroid, Zelda, and others got no such love. Fire Emblem, on the other hand, got 4 new additions, leaving me to wonder what sort of unique and interesting characters we could have gotten instead of these 3 excess anime sword guys. And I'm saying that as a guy who has 56 5-star allies in Fire Emblem Heroes and has played the Japanese-only releases of the series. It's too much, seriously. All the gripes aside though, this game offers a pretty diverse selection of fighters, and a lot of replay value can be found in mastering each one. Just as the roster is really important for the game, what you do with the roster is important as well. Let's talk about the different modes present in Smash 4, starting with single player. We can start with the original Classic mode. Classic mode has always followed a certain formula. You start with a predetermined set of lives and start with an introductory battle. From there, the formula gets more interesting with a 2-on-2 battle, a giant battle, and a meta battle. And there are challenge stages in between, and it all ends with a battle with the Master Hand. In Smash 4, it seems that there's been a large departure from this norm, leading me to question why the mode is called Classic in the first place. They throw out the typical structure of the previous games in favor of giving the player a choice regarding what kind of battle they would like to do next. The available options will range from a 1-on-1 to an all-out 8-player battle, but the choices don't seem to hold much weight outside of the nebulous Global Smash power score. Rather than starting out with 5 lives, the player gets 2 to spend on every battle. While this may seem like an arbitrary change, it really dismantles the engagement of the mode. In previous titles, players were rewarded for careful and effective play by getting to carry their extra lives into later, more difficult fights. In Smash 4, the player has 2 lives regardless, so no such play is encouraged. This makes the stages leading up to the boss battle much more tedious, as you'll only need to worry about defeating the current enemy, not preserving your lives for the next. The mix-up between the fights and the challenge stages provided a much better sense of progression, while Smash 4 just tosses a random variety of characters in no particular growing difficulty or order until you get to the last stage. The last stage is where things pick up, however. Depending on the difficulty chosen at the beginning of the mode, you may encounter the Master Core at the end of your playthrough. This morphing enemy will burst out of Master Hand and attack you through 4 different transformations before turning into a large fortress teeming with enemies that you may recognize from various Nintendo properties. It's a pretty challenging and exhilarating battle when it's all said and done, and almost makes up for the mode's setbacks. Almost. The other most significant mode is All-Star. In this mode, you battle through the entire cast of the game while managing how much damage you accrue through the use of health restorative items that are limited. You only have 1 life, so you need to play carefully and eliminate mistakes. I found this mode much more engaging than Classic due to the structure of it, but it seems like the battles breeze by even on the hardest difficulty. The previous Smash games offered more of a challenge through an adjustable difficulty, and it would have been nice to see the same challenging, very hard, or intense mode make a comeback. In addition to Classic and All-Star, there are a bunch of different modes that offer slight changes to the typical formula. Events offer some interesting and unique scenarios like the Ridley stage boss, along with a stamina match with Dark Samus, or battling various villains at the same time. It doesn't offer anything extraordinary, but it's a fun diversion that adds to the single-player content. Stadium lets players explore arena battles against the Mii's. Home Run Contest is a fun minigame where you build damage on a sandbag and then launch it with the famous item. Special Orders lets you earn currency in the game for a chance to win cool prizes. The twist here is that the battle will have wacky conditions applied, such as everybody reflecting projectiles back at you, or increased knockback. There are two flavors of Special Orders here. Master Orders is just spending gold for the chance to win a prize, while Crazy Orders is a little more interesting. You carry damage from battle to battle, and if you lose at any point, you forfeit all the prizes gained. There's a constant tension, therefore, between the prize you can grab next and cashing out on your current winnings. There is also a pretty robust training mode, allowing you to experiment with combos, items, and the speed of the game. The mode that is missing from this entry is some type of adventure mode. Debuting in Melee, adventure mode was your chance to explore and fight through some of the homeworlds of Nintendo characters, completing interesting challenges along the way. In Brawl, the mode was given an entire story mode filled with robust cutscenes, boss battles, and levels to explore. Adventure mode in Brawl was a nice concession for those that didn't have local friends to play the game with, or people who wanted to see all of these characters interact within some sort of story. I had a ton of fun with that mode, with multiple playthroughs on the hardest difficulty, so I was disappointed to see the mode vanish this time around, especially with the reduction in quality that Classic and All-Star received. Even with the absence of a proper adventure mode, there is a lot to do in this game, and we haven't even gotten into the customization elements or the multiplayer modes. There are a ton of things to customize in this Smash title. The stage creator is back with new tools at the user's disposal. This mode still lacks a lot of features you might expect in any sort of modern stage creator, but it is nonetheless a delightful inclusion into the game. You're able to experiment and create stages that otherwise wouldn't exist, which makes it a plus in my book. One of the huge features of this game was customization. The feature was alluded to in the earliest stages of development, so one could infer that this was going to be one of the standout features of the title. By completing the challenges inside of the game, you can earn custom special moves and stat boosting items. The stat boosting items can be used to correct weaknesses or change the overall attributes of a character. This is fun to experiment with, but never seems to grow past that. The feature never caught on with the casual or competitive players, leaving me to question exactly who the audience was for this, besides the back of the box cover. The biggest disappointment in these customizations lie in just the sheer lack of creativity with alternate special moves. One of the first demonstrations of this concept was the announcement of Palutena from Kid Icarus. Palutena has 12 unique special moves to mix and match based on player preference. Although I think this feature sits at odds with the pick up and play spirit of Super Smash Bros., it is an interesting option to play around with and pick the Palutena that best serves your individual playstyle. They also give this treatment to the Mii characters, though a lot of their moves are recycled moves from other characters. This is unfortunately not the case with the rest of the cast. Instead of doing the extra work to create interesting special moves for every character or scrapping the idea entirely, they just decided to half-ass the other 47 characters, and there's a certain pattern of mediocrity present with the rest of the moves. For instance, check out Donkey Kong's moves. Instead of sporting alternative specials, you just get sloppy adjustments for how they work with some tacked-on effect like fire or wind. These moves look juvenile, and it's hard to believe that they made it into the final product. I've seen unpaid modders execute better on this concept. With the disparity between Palutena's custom moves compared to the rest of the cast, I can't help but come to the conclusion that the developers ran out of time or resources but still wanted to shove this feature into the game. In fact, DLC characters don't even possess alternative moves, suggesting that the developers abandoned the feature in the updates. I remember going to check what moves Mewtwo would have, only to discover an empty page with the message, "No alternative moves available." And these were the characters that they charged $5 a piece to play with. But we're not in the DLC section, so I'll stop ranting for now. It's a shame, really. The half-baked nature of special moves feels like a goofy, unprofessional mod, and as far as stats goes, the system is a little too simplistic to garner much attention, not to mention that the very nature of customization is, again, at odds with the easy-to-pick-up and all-star brawling theme of the game. Let's talk about multiplayer. As you might imagine, this is the part of the game that shines. 8-player Smash really stands out. It is the necessary evolution of the original model of the game, a free-for-all brawler with zany characters. While the concept of adding more characters onto the map is incredibly simple and perhaps an obvious place for the series to go, the fact that this mode is actually engaging and fun is a marvelous feat. The days of having the loser pass their controller to the next person are over, and everyone can join in on the fun. Personally, I had a ton of fun playing this at house parties. We mixed up the formula, such as playing 4 versus 4, 4 versus 2, or 6 versus 2, and so on, to balance the playing field between more and less experienced players. I've even seen some local tournaments experiment with 8-player, and it was fun to watch. The other multiplayer modes present come with all the customizations you've come to expect from the series. There are still special modes for those of you who want to throw some spices into the typical formula, but there isn't much more to offer here than the original playstyle. Smash Run is available exclusively on the 3DS for that one time where you'll have 3 other friends who also have a 3DS, a copy of the game, and wouldn't just rather play the regular Smash mode or play the console version. I had a lot of fun with this mode, honestly though, roaming around destroying mostly recognizable baddies from Nintendo's anthology. Here's where my big gripe comes in, and this might just be a me thing, but I don't know, it just bothers me. 24% of the enemies you'll see from this mode are from Kid Icarus, director Masahiro Sakurai's previous game. This mode is teeming with references to the game, making it feel more like a celebration of Kid Icarus than a celebration of Nintendo properties. I mean, seriously, like more Kid Icarus characters than Mario or Zelda or Pokemon or Kirby or Donkey Kong, like all of these series that, you know, it's just playing this game, I was just wondering who any of these guys were, and then I'd, every once in a while see a Kremling and like, oh, I know who that is, and see a Bullet Bill, that's Nintendo. But man, I feel like that's just such a lame part of that mode. Anyway, moving on. The biggest glaring disappointment of the multiplayer portion of this game is Smash Party? Every time I talk about this mode, I have to look up what it's called because it's incredibly forgettable. It is a gangly mess of a mode without anything interesting to offer. You move around like a Mario Party board and battle with different conditions applied randomly, and you can use some trophy items to mix things up on the board, but it's fundamentally broken, leaving players to fight multiple times only for the winner to be decided by one battle where the person who had the most luck typically wins, which I assume is the point of this mode, to be like a board game heavily influenced by luck. The end battle for this is pretty interesting though, as you get to battle where each stock of your character is a different person that you had previously required. So you might start with Mario and then you lose a life and you come out as Bowser, so on and so forth. It would have been really interesting if each player could pick a team of fighters and have one stock per character like Marvel vs. Capcom, but this functionality is reserved for this sorry excuse of a mode and that Project M mod. Speaking of lack of options, this is the second Smash title to feature an online mode. While it is nice to be able to battle your friends online, the lack of options available to players shows a complete misunderstanding of the Smash audience. When you enter online, you are led to choose between 3 different modes of play. With friends, which is what you can expect, for fun, with items, stage hazards, and free-for-all battles, and for glory, the quote-unquote competitive mode. And I say that with giant quotation marks, giant sarcastic quotations. This mode lets you play without stage hazards, one-on-one, teams, or free-for-all. This part of the game is a fundamental misunderstanding of what competitive Smash is, and I know that people joke about no items, Final Destination, Fox only, but a huge part of competitive Super Smash Bros. Is in the stage pick. In fact, the competitive scene that grew for Smash 4 had Smashville as the default stage. Final Destination isn't even the most fair stage, as zoning characters possess a little bit of an advantage on it. Other characters and players do considerably better with platforms, or they may be able to capitalize off of mix-ups on stages like Smashville. Instead of figuring out a way to have Smash players choose a stage, a random Omega version is assigned. In Smash 4, there is an Omega version of every stage, which removes the hazards from the stage and alters the size and structure of it. Instead of removing the hazards and calling it a day like some mods have accomplished, or trying to capture the essence of what people liked about the stage in a competitively viable fashion, they reduce every stage to the Final Destination palette. While this is better than nothing, it seems like the developers overlooked one of the largest features of competitive Smash. In most fighters, every stage is exactly the same, offering only a different setting and soundtrack to go along with the fight. Super Smash Bros. Offers different structures, creating a stage counter-picking game. For instance, Donkey Kong can struggle against Diddy Kong on Final Destination because Diddy's speed and projectile game makes it difficult for Donkey Kong to approach. In that matchup, Donkey Kong may choose to take the next match to Battlefield, where he can use the platforms to approach Diddy in different ways, or score an early vertical KO from a clutch grab on the top platform. Without the ability to select a stage, the flat nature of every Omega stage gives a distinct advantage to certain characters, especially when you account for latency. Now, I know what you're saying. Do you really expect Sakurai's team to develop a hazardless version of every stage or even a number of stages just to play competitive matches on? The funny thing about it is that these exist. They literally exist in the game. In certain modes like All-Star, many stages have the hazards removed, meaning the only reason we can't access those stages is because the developers didn't feel like creating the option in multiplayer. Would it have been that difficult to let players take 15 seconds to select one of a particular set of stages before the match starts? It could easily be like playing with friends. With this option absent, the developers have restricted one of the largest draws of competitive Smash and turned it into the meme. The Fox Final Destination meme. What did they do for 2-on-2 battles? They left Team Attack off. Contrary to what multiplayer tournaments do. Instead of stock, you play a 2-minute match based on score. Most tournaments have Team Attack on due to certain abusable strategies being present without Team Attack. Players who were looking for an accessible competitive match will have to settle for this, again, half-baked solution at appeasing the competitive Smash community, or people who want to play a different way than the developers may have intended. I know it might sound ridiculous that we expect Smash to cater to these different types of play that have developed in previous titles, but the most wonderful thing about the Smash series is its versatility. You can enjoy the main Smash mode with anywhere from 2 to 8 players. You can form teams, decide if you want to play based on score or stock, and because of this, Smash functions as a phenomenal party game as well as a true competitive fighter. People are so passionate about the competitive nature of Melee that national tournaments are still being held for this game that's, like 18 years old at this point? It's unfortunate that this game doesn't truly entertain that competitive nature within any other modes besides the standard multiplayer Smash. Omega stages are just incredibly lazy steps in the right direction. That's really my biggest raging disappointment with this title and the last one. The versatility of Super Smash Bros. Was always celebrated in the first two titles, being a tournament viable product while having a massive casual audience as well. In Smash 4, they chose to continue making a slower paced, easier to understand Smash experience at the expense of both the casual and competitive audience. All of the many modes of play to mix up the formula, and in classic mode, All-Star, Smash Board or Party, whatever, events and master orders, everything goes into this funnel just being dropped into an arena with a random assortment of foes on a random stage. The modes are nearly indistinguishable from one another, which is by no means different from any other fighter, but the past 3 Smash games managed to offer a little variety through a superior target test, adventure modes, and other modes that kept you engaged, and the first 2 games had a easy to approach yet very deep learning curve. In the most recent release, it just doesn't seem like there's much depth under the surface in the casual or competitive sense. On one hand, maybe the content in this game feels so Dynasty Warriors because certain modes were cut to hone in on the multiplayer, which is what people love most about Super Smash Bros., adding an obscene amount of characters and stages, but I feel that the improvements to the overall Smash experience haven't come far enough to justify it. The game tries to strike a balance between the hardcore competitive Melee and the casual newcomer-friendly Brawl. While I think Smash 4 retains the newcomer friendliness, it largely fails to capture any competitive prowess that Melee had. Airspeed is increased from Brawl, but not near the speed of Melee, making the game feel a bit slower. In addition to this, defensive actions like rolling and dodging in the air are much more difficult to punish in this game due to the lack of cooldown on the movements. The prevalence of defensive options coupled with the lack of hit stun decreases the reward for offensive play for much of the cast. In addition, it is more difficult to KO other players due to the decreased airspeed and knockback of certain moves. It takes longer to get a knockout because of the oversimplification of recovering, one of the pillars of the franchise's design. These adjustments make the game slower and more campy than its melee counterpart, and with the decreased hit stun, players rely on bread and butter combos, which typically consist of some sort of throw mixed with an up aerial. With low hit stun, players typically only have one optimal option to rack up damage. This reliance on a small, particular set of combos with each character has made the competitive scene decidedly more stale, as well as formed a gap between the good characters and the bad ones. Fighting games are all about risk and reward. The characters that have risen to the top of the competitive ranks are simply the ones with the most favorable risk-to-reward ratio. It is much more likely to score significant percent off of a grab from Diddy Kong, given his approach options compared to someone sluggish like Ganondorf. While Ganondorf is a much stronger character, the risk his sluggish movement possesses far outweighs the reward of actually landing one or two attacks with him. Sm4sh has attempted to balance the cast through various patches, though little has changed over the course of the game. I feel like the developers have had a strange philosophy with balance patches. They tried to patch dominant strategies rather than examine what was forming those divides in character potential in the first place. If you look at the tier lists from any of the Smash games, you'll notice a certain type of character dominating. The quick, nimble, low-risk, high-reward characters continue to occupy the top of the tier list, and years of patches later, the development team can't seem to figure out how to balance this title. Certain characters like Bowser and Donkey Kong rose dramatically after their grab game was buffed, but plummeted just as quickly once their advantages were pulled back. In fact, the last character they added has unsurprisingly turned into the undisputed best character in the game in a very short amount of time. You see, Bayonetta is a combo-heavy character plopped into a game where combos aren't as viable as they used to be in Melee or Smash 1. I will concede that this is all very much in the weeds, and Super Smash Bros. Is really only competing with itself in this matter. Other games have tried to crack the secret sauce that makes Super Smash Bros. So enjoyable for professionals and casual people alike, but Smash Bros. Seems to continue to sit in a tier of its own. The combination of incredibly unique characters mixed with the ring out system and the variations of 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, or any combination creates a memorable experience that will achieve some degree of competitive success regardless of how shallow it is under the hood. Let's move on to DLC. Ever since the 50-fact extravaganza that kicked off Super Smash Bros. For a month before the game's release, it was announced that Super Smash Bros. Would have DLC for the first time. While it is great that we got 7 new characters, 9 new stages, and over 30 new costumes, I think the value proposition has to be called into question. Super Smash Bros. For Wii U is a $60 game, and the DLC amounts to over $60 in itself. This cost may be to make up for how expensive the game was to produce or a reflection of the cost required to keep the staff on to complete the content, but it looks silly standing next to the DLC offerings of the likes of Mario Kart 8. My theory on DLC, just as some supplementary context, is that it's a wonderful thing when it's not a cash grab. Mario Kart was a $60 game with $16 of DLC. The game's track selection was expanded by 50% for under 30% of the original cost. In the case of Fire Emblem Fates, you get additional story modes for 50% of the price of the game that you started with, though the extra DLC is an absolute ripoff. In the case of Super Smash Bros., you pay over 100% of the original price for 7 more characters, 9 more stages, totaling for about 15% more game. While I understand that it could be expensive to figure out how to acquire and implement properties like Final Fantasy into the game, other characters like Lucas feel like an unnecessary upcharge to get back the characters that we had in previous titles. Couple that with the premium price stages from older Smash games, and I'm left with a bad taste in my mouth from these DLC offerings. To wrap things up, Super Smash Bros. 4 is certainly a Super Smash Bros. Game. It continues to resolve the approachability problem that fighting games have always had. They created an easily learned yet difficult to master game system. They provided a cast of recognizable characters that offer an unprecedented diversity of fighters in the genre, and created many different ways to play that people of all different ages, skill levels could enjoy. Whether you want to experience the chaos of 8-player Smash or sharpen your skills in For Glory, Smash has you covered. This game is shallow enough at times to support the most basic of play, yet deep enough for players to make a career out of it. The biggest problem I have with this game is just all the untapped potential I see around it. I mean, this game did fine critically, it sold fine, I enjoyed it, I played it a lot, but I just think about these things, like how much more interesting could the competitive scene have been if the game was properly balanced with a deeper combo and edge guarding system with more hazardless stages? How much more rich would the roster be if the likes of Palutena and Corrin were replaced with more iconic, more requested characters? Would the single-player offerings have been better if we got more distinct modes with more options rather than these half-baked ones that made it into the release? I still love Super Smash Bros. I'd call it my favorite franchise, but I find the newer titles to be less engaging even with the much larger content offerings that are on the table. The new direction of the series seems so concerned with how you're going to play the game, so they made it not so competitive because they didn't intend for the game to be competitive like Melee was. They didn't make stage hazards a toggleable thing because PlayStation All-Stars did that. They didn't want a story mode because some people watch cutscenes on the internet. And instead of working on those things, we got Smash Party, lame character customization, and an accompanying 3DS version of the game that held back the main release. Again, I love Super Smash Bros., but I hate the direction it's heading in. And to further discuss that direction, we need to discuss the director, Masahiro Sakurai, the George Lucas of video games. Join me for that video next time, and in the meantime, if you're looking for more Nintendo content, I post all the latest news, impressions, and reviews over at Nintendo Nightly, my Nintendo-centric YouTube channel/podcast. Thank you so much for watching the video. Subscribe if you want to hear more about Smash, more analysis on properties of media. I don't know what I'm doing with this channel, but subscribe if you like the video. I'll see you in the next one.